Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Fio. Today I'm going to be doing a 2023 book review of every single book that I read in 2023. Very straight to the point. So last year I sat down and I did the exact same video, but I did it at the end of the year. So it was kind of hard to remember the storyline of every single book that I read. So I would have to go back and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do this year is that every 3 books that I read, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to update you. So it's going to be like a timeline throughout the year and just tell you a little quick summary and then my rating for it and why. So my goal, I'm filming this right now in early February, and my goal for the end of the year is 30 books. So hopefully we get there. We'll see in December, but let's get started. This is my handy dandy little bookmark that I make. Right now it has all the books that I plan to read, and then the ones that I have read, I give it the rating. So then I also remember what I give it. The first book that I read this year is called One True Loves. This author blew me away with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, so I wanted to read another one of her books right after. I think that TikTok might have overhyped this book. It's a story about this woman whose husband passes away, and she, on a trip, and then she falls in love with another man, and then a couple of years later, she finds out that her dead husband is not actually dead, and he comes back into her life. And she has to choose between her fiance now or her husband, who she's still legally married to. I gave the book a 5 out of 10 just because I think that because I came off from reading The 7 Husbands, it was a 10 out of 10. It was fantastic. And I was expecting the same level. But it was a very good storyline. It had its good moments where you were like, oh my gosh. But it seemed very repetitive, the predicaments, the conversations, it was just very repetitive and predictable. So for that reason, I give it a 5. The second book I've read in 2023 is Love in Other Words. This book was very good. I gave it a 7. The only reason that I gave it a 7 is because it felt like other books that I have read before. The storyline is about a girl and a guy that they were in love when they were teenagers. And then they had a fallout, and then it's 11 years later, and they're kind of re-meeting each other kind of thing. And it switches between past and present. And it was good. There was moments where I cried in it, but it just seemed like a lot of other books that I've read before. So it was very similar storyline. So for that reason, I gave it a 7. The third book I read this year, I don't have it with me because I actually just lent it to my friend Annie yesterday. It's called Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. I gave that book a good 9 out of 10. It was a fantastic book. It was the story of this teenage couple that got pregnant, and that's the first chapter. And then it fast forwards to 16 years later, and the point of view switches between the mother and the daughter that she had when she was also 17. The whole storyline of the book, I don't really want to spoil it because it's so stinking good, but the father passes away. And then her sister also passes away as well. And the mom and the daughter have to deal with the loss and rebuilding their relationship. And then in the middle of the loss, they find out that there was a lot of lies going on. So they have to kind of rebuild all their trust and all this different stuff. Bawled my eyes out at the end of the book. Fantastic. The next book I read is 100 Other Girls. My friend Nina and Giselle recommended me this book. And it's about basically what it takes to make it in the publishing industry in New York City, and how difficult it is to make a name out of yourself, and how corrupt the industries are when it comes to anything entertainment. I rated this book a 6.5. The storyline was good. I guess you could say the drama kept you on your toes, but it was just very, very, very woke writing. Those Netflix movies that come out and you're cringing and making fun of it the whole entire time because they try to speak very modernized and slangy and try to incorporate everything that's going on TikTok and Instagram and all that stuff into their dialogue. That's what this book felt like. And for that reason, I give it a 6.5. The next book I read was 1984. My friend Ethan recommended me this book, and I know that a lot of people had to read it in high school. I personally never had to. I was in AP classes, and we read more of like Shakespeare and stuff like that. So a lot of people were telling me that they didn't like it, and I was very scared about it. It's very interesting, actually, because it was published in the 1940s, and it takes place in 1984. And the author is basically foreshadowing what is going to happen in society if we don't start sticking up for our beliefs and our rights. And it's Big Brother's always watching, and Big Brother's the government, which the whole entire book is about how the government is going to try to brainwash you into believing exactly what they need you to, and if you don't, you're going to get in trouble for it. It talks about how there's like cameras everywhere, like the government is watching you like through your house, through like so many different things, and it's kind of frightening because like they do that through our phones and all that stuff. And before I started reading the book, Ethan told me, he's like, read it with the information that you know about our government now. And I was just like, oh my freaking gosh. And it also talks about how sex is no longer a pure thing that you do with someone that you love, but you do it with anyone just to do it because it's more of a want than like something that you like keep sacred. So they talk about how the purity in love and marriage and sex is no longer going to be there in the future. And I was just kind of like, oh my goodness. I rated the book at 8.5. It was very, very interesting. The only thing that bothered me is that I hate books in third person, and this book was in third person. And there's only 3 chapters, and each chapter is 110 pages. So you can't really just like stop reading like wherever. You have to like make sure that like something big isn't going to happen like within the chapter next. But it was a very good book. I applaud Ethan for recommending me the book. The next book I read is The Paris Apartment, and it's about this building that each floor, there's only like 4 floors, I believe. Each floor is an apartment, and everyone in the building is family except for one of them. And he ends up going missing, and his sister comes to visit him, and he's missing. So the novel is about her figuring out what happened to him, but it's in the point of view of every single character in the book. So of every single person that lives in the building. I thought that it was an interesting book because I love crime books because I can put in like all like my Spencer Reid Criminal Minds knowledge into it, but it did feel really, really slow, and it didn't really pick up until the end of the book. For that reason, I rated it at 5.5. The next book I read, I don't have it with me because I read it while I was home in Florida. It's called No Place to Fall. This book used to be my favorite book ever in high school, and I wanted to read it to see if I still enjoyed it as much as I did, and I did. The book is about a high school girl who, she is a very talented musician. She's a very talented singer, and she wants to make it in that industry, but her mom very much believes that her talent that God gave her is used for that, for the church and to worship God. The book is very much of a coming of age, like her realizing like what she wants and who she is. On top of that, she has to deal with the family drama of drug dealing, drug abuse, and family affairs that she's very much aware of, but she wants to grow out of that and not be part of it like her family is and just follow her dreams in music. I very much say this book is a mirror image of my life, minus the drugs and the affairs and all that, because in high school I wanted to pursue music and my mom was very much like, Hollywood is too corrupt. But I rate the book a 9. I think it's a fantastic book. It's an easy read. I read it in one day. It's chef's kiss. The next book I read I don't have with me because I am currently home for spring break, but it was Twisted Love, and I rated that book a 4 out of 10 because it felt like a knockoff version of the After series, if any of y'all have read or watched those movies. Basically, the whole storyline of the book is that this brother and sister live next door to each other, but the brother has to go on a job to Central America, so he leaves his best friend in charge. And the best friend is like this like super like hardened, like so mean, like tough boy act kind of thing. Then he has a lot of trauma, and so does the girl, but they fall in love with each other. And then she finds out that he was kind of using her, but she was kind of using him too, but then they realize that they're in love with each other. So it was that same kind of like after thing. The next book I read is It Happened One Summer. This book was so beautiful. I rated it a 9 out of 10, and it's about this girl that she comes from a lot of money, and she does something that like kind of throw her parents over the edge, and they sent her to a small town where her dad was from to kind of learn the value of money because she's a little daddy's girl. Or daddy's credit card girl, I should say. And she falls in love with a fisherman, and then she learns that it's more valuable to be liked and loved by who you are rather than the things that you have, and it's not good to be materialistic. So it was a very beautiful read. It was in third person, and I didn't mind it because I hate books in third person, and I actually really enjoyed it. Then I read Every Summer After, and this book, I read it in like a day and a half. It has a hold on me. It was so fantastic. I rated it a 9.5 out of 10. And this was the 10th book I read in 2023. So 20 more to go until I hit 30. But the book is basically about your first loves, and it goes between past and present. And basically, if you read One True Loves, it's a similar storyline where they were in love with each other over the summers, and that's the only time they would see each other. But then fast forward to like 11 years later, and they get to reunite and just kind of fix the wrongs that went there, and then fall in love with each other all over again. And it was a very beautiful read. It was 10 times better than One True Loves, and I might reread it sometime soon. The next book I read is The Hating Game, and I rated this an 8 out of 10. It's the perfect enemies to lovers trope. I read it in 2 days. It was so funny, and it's basically these two coworkers that basically put aside their hate, and they realize that, they're in love with each other. It's full of a little bit of betrayal, but it was so funny. And there's actually a movie that was made, as you can see. It says like soon to be a major motion picture. I watched the movie right after I finished the book. The movie did not do the book its justice. The movie was like a solid 2. And it has Lucy Hale in it. It was good, but it wasn't like, it's never as good as the book. The next book I read is part of the Ravenhood series, and I don't know exactly how to explain the book without giving so many spoilers, but the first book in the Ravenhood series is called The Flock. I don't have it with me because I already lent it out to my friend Macy. This book was my first 10 out of 10 of the year. It was the best book I have read so far. The whole plot of the book is this 19-year-old girl has to go live with her dad for a year to win her inheritance, where she falls in love with 2 men, and they have everyone in like their friend group, the guys that she meets, they have a tattoo of a raven, and it's because they're part of a Ravenhood. And the whole entire time I was very frustrated with homegirl Cecilia, because I personally don't think that you can be in love with 2 people, and she was, and I thought that it was more lust than love, but according to her, she loved them both. Anyway, but there was just a lot of secrets, and there was certain things in the book that I was like, this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. Like, why, are they like this? And you only know as much as the main character does, because it's in her perspective, and you get what the men are telling her. And then at one point, and this is very important because if you haven't read this other book, then you might as well read it before you read this. In one of the scenes, her and one of the men are reading 1984, and I was like, oh, that's so ironic, like I read this book earlier this year. And he kind of gives his perspective on it, and then a couple chapters later she has an argument with the other guy about 1984, and then everything he's saying and you put together what the other guy was saying, it all comes together as how that book was merely based on a lot of 1984 theories. So if you read 1984, you'll understand the book more, and your mind will go like, oh my freaking mother of gosh. Also, one of the theories about 1984 was how love and marriage and sex wasn't gonna mean anything in the future. And reading the book, I understand why it was based off of 1984, not only because of that, but for multiple other reasons. But 10-10, you get answers about the Ravenhood in the end of the book, but it ends it with oh my freaking gosh, 10 out of 10, will forever recommend that book. The next book I read is Exodus, and this is the second book in the Ravenhood series. And holy mother of God, I didn't think I was going to rate the second book a 10 out of 10. And you know what? It's a 10 out of 10. It is so stinking good. And now, not only does she in love with 2 men, she's in love with 3. And I was so freaking mad. I was like, you can't love 3 people. Like, it's just so insanely frustrating. And I bawled my eyes through this book. I laughed, I screamed, it was just so stinking good because you get so many answers, and then it fast forwards to the future, and then there's just so many plot twists that, like, the one at the end, like, especially, and your heart just like cries because the writing in this is so beautiful too, and your heart just cries because a lot of it, she finally realizes who she was genuinely in love with. Like, she did love all 3 men, but there was one that, like, you know, will forever, like, have her. And the book is just about redemption and being selfless when it comes to love and protecting the people that you love, even though it hurts you. There's so many more secrets in the Ravenhood that they find out. And then as you get the truth, another light comes in, another secret, another truth. And when I finished the book, I was like, there is no way that there can be a 3rd book because it has a happy ending. Well, the note at the end of the book is that there's more secrets to come. So we'll see what happens in the 3rd book.
The next book I read is The Finish Line, which is the 3rd and final book in the Ravenhood series. I rated this book a 7.5 out of 10. It was low-key disappointing because the other 2 books were so darn good. But even though we kind of already got the answers in the 2nd book of everything that happened, this book just kind of explains the past and why everything was formed, how it was formed, and all those, like, little details that the other books doesn't give us. My mind was blown to find out that 1984, you know, Big Brother's Always Watching, was not really the company, but the people, which, if you read it, you'll know that the company's a whole thing, but it was more of the people inside it. It's crazy. And this book really focuses on how hard it is to forgive someone that you love that has hurt you, like, in ways that you never thought would hurt you. And I'm still wondering if, like, their love was real or if it was more of, like, a comfort of, like, I don't know, like, I can't get out of this, so I'm gonna love you kind of thing. And that's why it's taking a hold on me. That was my final question on this book. The next book I read is The Silent Patient. This is book number 15 of 2023, so halfway through my goal of 30. And I rated this book a 9.5 out of 10. This book is about a woman who murders her husband, and she is just silent, just will not speak, and she's kind of like in a psych ward, and there's a doctor that's coming in to help her because he wants her to get better. Like, it's a very genuine thing, and he's trying to get her to talk. And there's this book, every single chapter, you can't put it down because you're like, oh my gosh, I need to find out what's coming up next. The only thing that I didn't like is that how it ended, because, like, you get the answer, but kind of like in the oh really kind of thing. And biggest plot twist. And my friend Annie had read this book, and she said it's one of her favorite books, and I would be texting her, she was like, you're so wrong, like, you're not going to be expecting it. I was not expecting it. It was so freaking good. The following book I read is Archer's Voice. This book will forever have the same type of hold on me that Reminders of Him has on me. It's a 10 out of 10. There's certain characters in books that remind you why you don't settle in life. Archer is the reason we don't settle in life for anything but the best. This is a small town romance. This girl is escaping her father's death because she's just so sad. So she comes to this little small town and she meets Archer, who is mute. And they talk through sign. It's very beautiful. And this whole moral of the book is that it takes one person to significantly change your life for the better. And that when it's real love and when you genuinely, like, love a person, you don't care about how tainted their past is or what people say about you or your relationship with the person, because you know, like, at the end, you know the person and you know who they are rather than what people say that they are. It's a beautiful love story. Cried. It's fantastic. 10/10. if I could give it like a 100 out of 10, I 100% would. It's so stinking good. The next book I read is Miss Daisy Jones and the Six. So this might get a lot of hate, but I rated the book a 7 out of 10. And I had decided to watch the series before I read the book because I always get disappointed when I read the book first and then I read and then I watch the series or watch the movie. And this is the first time that I can say that I enjoyed the series more than I enjoyed the book. The book is about a 1970s band. They become basically like the queen of like the 1970s, but in the book. And they're getting interviewed 20 years later, and the whole book is just an interview and people reminiscing like their past. And our main character Billy is, confused between Daisy and his wife and his family, and it just kind of shows how difficult like touring and drugs and alcohol and addiction was like in the 1970s, and how it takes a lot to be able to like get out of that. It's a beautiful story, but I just thought that the series was a lot more realistic than the book was. The next book I read is The Perfect Marriage. I read this book in one day. I remember I started at like 9 in the morning and I finished at like 10 p.m. at night. It's not that thick, and I rated it a 9 out of 10. This book is about a man who is accused of murdering his mistress, and his attorney for the case is his wife, who is a very famous and known lawyer. So there are so many plots and twists everywhere in this book, and there's so many lies about the dead mistress. Also, sorry that it's loud outside, don't know what's going on. So many lies about the dead mistress and all these truths coming in. And my original thought, I pushed under the book, or under the rug, I guess you could say. And you know what? I was right. It's such a good plot twist. I highly recommend this book. The next book I read is The Last Thing He Told Me. I rated this book an 8.5. I still haven't watched the Apple TV series. There were some parts that it felt very slow, but overall it was a pretty good book. This book is about a man who leaves his wife and his daughter. The wife is the stepmom of the daughter. And the only thing he leaves is a note saying protect her and $600,000 worth in cash. They think he goes missing. They don't know why he's running away. The whole book is about the stepmom and the daughter of the man who ran away trying to find him. And it's just a beautiful story that you really have to dig into it to see the beauty in it, of how a relationship like grows and is healed, because the stepdaughter and the stepdaughter don't get along because the stepmom is constantly trying to be her friend and the stepdaughter doesn't want it. And it's all about trust, and there are just so many lies that get uncovered during this. So highly recommend it. I still have to watch the TV series, so I don't know which one's better, but it's a very good book. The 20th book I read this year is Hopeless by Colleen Hoover, and this book was a 10 out of 10. This book is so good. I was very humbly bawling my eyes out reading this on the plane back from Colorado, and I give it to Annie the second that I finished it, because it's just about innocent and like how like your heart never forgets like your real love, and a lot has to do with trauma and PTSD and how your brain blocks out like very traumatic things from your past without knowing it, and just a lot of realizations of what the truth is and how things, even though you don't want to accept it, are done for love, and then how you realize that those things, even though they bothered you, what was for your benefit. This book is reminders of him, Hopeless. They're right with each other. They're so freaking good. If you are over Colleen Hoover, because I know a lot of us are, read this book because it's so insanely good. So I have made a decision that instead of doing one super long book review at the end of the year, I'm gonna do it in parts throughout the year. I'm gonna cut off every like 22 to 25 minutes. So this is part 1. I have read 20 books in part 1. We'll see at what number I am at part 2, because my goal for 2023 is 30 books, and we are only in May, and I have already read 20. So I'm very excited for part 2, which will come out in a couple months, because this video took 5 months of reading to do. So maybe by the end of the summer, because during the summer I read a lot. So thank you guys so much for watching my book review, and I hope it inspires you to read at least one of them, and see you next time.